Ever wondered why presidential motorcades have identical limousines with matching license plates? From decoys performing elaborate shell games at highway speeds to a beast getting stuck on a Dublin speed bump, the world of presidential protection is stranger than fiction. These armored fortresses hide secrets that would make James Bond jealous, including blood banks, electric door handles, and price tags that rival fighter jets. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about presidential decoy vehicles. Fact 1. The shell game shuffle. When the presidential motorcade rolls through city streets or along highways, something extraordinary happens that most observers never notice. The identical black limousines don't just drive in a straight formation like you might expect. Instead, Secret Service drivers perform what's known internally as the shell game shuffle, a carefully choreographed series of maneuvers where the vehicles constantly swap positions while moving at speed. One moment, the real presidential limousine might be the second vehicle in the formation, and within minutes, after a series of coordinated lane changes and position swaps, it could be the fourth or fifth vehicle. The drivers execute these movements with military precision, weaving the identical vehicles in and out of formation in patterns that appear random to outside observers, but are actually carefully planned tactical maneuvers. This constant shuffling serves a critical security purpose because it makes it virtually impossible for anyone watching the motorcade to determine which specific vehicle actually contains the president. A potential attacker studying the motorcade from a building window or roadside position cannot simply memorize which car is third in line or watch for a specific vehicle. By the time they've tracked one limousine, the formation has already changed, and the president could now be in an entirely different vehicle. The Secret Service trains extensively for these maneuvers at their James J. Rowley training complex, where drivers practice the choreography repeatedly until the movements become second nature. The effectiveness of this tactic relies on split-second timing, perfect communication between drivers, and the fact that all the limousines are mechanically identical, allowing them to maintain the same speeds and handling characteristics during these complex formations. This elaborate security dance happens every single time the president travels by motorcade, turning what looks like a simple convoy into a constantly shifting puzzle that keeps potential threats guessing. Fact 2. Identical license plates on every decoy. Here's something that sounds almost too simple to be true, but it's one of the most effective deception tactics in presidential security. Every single limousine in the presidential motorcade, whether it's the actual vehicle carrying the president or one of the decoys, displays exactly the same license plate number. For years, that number has been 800-002, making it completely impossible to identify which vehicle is the real presidential limousine by simply checking the plates. This seems like such an obvious security measure that you might wonder why all the technical discussions about armored doors and bulletproof glass get more attention. But the identical plate strategy is brilliantly effective in its simplicity. Think about how easy it would be for someone with bad intentions to scout out the motorcade beforehand, take a photo of the license plate on the presidential vehicle, and then use that information to identify exactly which car to target during an actual event. With identical plates across all the limousines, that entire surveillance strategy becomes worthless. The matching plates work in combination with the shell game shuffle to create layers of confusion. Even if someone manages to track a specific vehicle through the formation changes, they still can't verify whether they're following the right car by checking the plate number. Intelligence agencies from hostile nations who might photograph motorcades during international visits find themselves with images of multiple vehicles all bearing the same registration, making their surveillance photos essentially useless for planning purposes. The Secret Service doesn't publicly discuss many details about how they manage vehicle registration with duplicate plates, or whether these are special government plates that operate outside normal DMV systems, but the tactic has been documented by journalists and security experts who have observed and photographed presidential motorcades over the years. This simple but clever approach proves that sometimes the most effective security measures aren't the most technologically sophisticated ones. Fact 3. 7 beasts at Biden's inauguration. President Joe Biden's inauguration on January 20th, 2021 featured what security experts and journalists dubbed the mother of all motorcades. 7 identical presidential limousines, all the latest model of the beast, rolled through Washington, D.C. that day in what was an unprecedented display of security redundancy. To understand why this was so unusual, you need to know that typically a presidential motorcade includes 2 or 3 identical limousines at most. The Secret Service generally deploys one vehicle containing the president and 1 or 2 decoys, which is already considered extremely secure. But Biden's inauguration represented a perfect storm of security concerns. The event occurred just 2 weeks after the January 6th Capitol riot, with Washington, D.C. still reeling from that unprecedented breach of security. Intelligence agencies had received numerous threats, and tens of thousands of National Guard troops were stationed throughout the Capitol. The heightened threat environment convinced the Secret Service to deploy every available presidential limousine in their fleet. The sight of 7 identical black armored vehicles moving in formation was remarkable even to seasoned security professionals and journalists who had covered presidential events for decades. Each one of those vehicles costs approximately $1.5 million, meaning the motorcade represented over $10 million worth of armored limousines alone, not counting the dozens of support vehicles in the full convoy. The decoy strategy reached its absolute maximum effectiveness that day because even trained observers watching the motorcade couldn't possibly track which of the 7 identical vehicles might contain the president. The Secret Service never confirmed which position Biden actually rode in, and the constant position swapping during the route made it impossible for anyone to determine. This massive deployment of decoys demonstrated how the service adapts security protocols to match threat levels, scaling up the number of identical vehicles when circumstances demand extraordinary measures. Fact 4. FDR's first armored car was Al Capone's. One of the strangest stories in presidential security history began on December 7, 1941, the day of the Pearl Harbor attack. President Franklin D. Roosevelt suddenly needed an armored vehicle for protection, but the government faced an unusual problem. Federal procurement rules at the time limited automobile purchases to $750, and obviously no armored vehicle could be purchased for that amount. The Secret Service needed an immediate solution because the attack on Pearl Harbor meant the president could now be a target, and his standard open-top touring car was completely unprotected. The answer came from an unexpected source: the Treasury Department's cache of seized vehicles from criminal investigations. Sitting in a government warehouse was a 1928 Cadillac Town sedan that had belonged to notorious gangster Al Capone before his arrest and conviction for tax evasion in 1931. Capone, ever paranoid about rival gangs, had spent a fortune outfitting the Cadillac with bulletproof glass, reinforced steel plating, and a police siren. The car even had a specially designed rear window that could drop down so Capone's bodyguards could return fire during attacks. Since the government already owned this vehicle through asset forfeiture, no purchase was necessary, and the procurement rules didn't apply. Within hours of the Pearl Harbor attack, Secret Service agents pulled the Cadillac out of storage, gave it a quick inspection and cleaning, and put President Roosevelt inside for his trip to the Capitol to deliver his famous Day of Infamy speech to Congress on December 8th. The irony wasn't lost on anyone involved. America's president, about to ask Congress to declare war on Japan, rode to the Capitol in a car that had been custom-built for one of America's most infamous criminals. News of this unusual arrangement eventually leaked to the press, and it became one of those strange historical footnotes that people still find fascinating decades later. Roosevelt continued using Al Capone's armored Cadillac for several months until the government could arrange for proper presidential vehicles to be built. Fact 5. Decoy limos get destroyed. Like real ones. When presidential limousines reach the end of their service life, something dramatic happens that most people never consider. The Secret Service doesn't sell these vehicles at auction, donate them to museums, or even carefully dismantle them for parts. Instead, both the actual presidential limousines and all the decoy vehicles get completely destroyed using a combination of bullets, explosives, and industrial crushing equipment. This destruction protocol makes no distinction between the limousine that actually carried the president and the decoys that never had anyone more important than a Secret Service agent inside. Every single vehicle receives the same terminal treatment. The reason for this extreme measure is simple but critical. These vehicles contain construction secrets that could compromise future presidential security if they fell into the wrong hands. The armor plating techniques, the specific materials used in the layered protection systems, the locations of vulnerable points in the design, the electronic countermeasures built into the vehicles, and dozens of other security features represent billions of dollars in research and development. If even one retired limousine ended up being carefully studied by hostile intelligence services or sophisticated criminal organizations, They could identify weaknesses or develop attacks specifically designed to defeat these protection systems. The Secret Service cannot take any chances, so they destroy everything. The process reportedly begins with agents using firearms to test that the armor still holds, essentially shooting the vehicles to ensure the protection systems were working properly throughout their service life. Then explosives destroy the sensitive electronic systems and compromise the structural integrity. Finally, the remains get crushed and shredded in industrial equipment until nothing recognizable remains. This means that unlike other famous presidential vehicles, like Kennedy's Lincoln Continental, which is preserved at the Henry Ford Museum, modern presidential limousines will never be seen by the public once they're retired. The Decoys receive this same treatment because even though they never carried the president, they're mechanically and structurally identical to the real presidential vehicle, containing all the same security secrets. Fact 6. Obama's Decoy got stuck in Ireland. During President Barack Obama's visit to Ireland in May of 2011, one of the presidential limousines suffered an embarrassing mishap that perfectly demonstrated why the Secret Service always travels with multiple identical decoys. The Motorcade was leaving the U.S. Embassy in Dublin when one of the armored limousines became completely wedged on a ramp at the embassy exit. The vehicle's undercarriage, heavy with armor plating and reinforced components, made contact with the inclined ramp surface with a loud scraping sound that made everyone in the vicinity wince. The driver tried to back up, then attempted to power forward, but the beast was thoroughly stuck, its immense weight and low clearance conspiring against it. This happened right as the motorcade was supposed to be leaving for Obama's next scheduled event, which could have created a serious security problem if there hadn't been backup vehicles. Fortunately, the Secret Service had brought multiple identical limousines, so Obama simply transferred to one of the decoy vehicles and continued with his schedule while agents dealt with the stuck limousine. The incident drew a small crowd of embassy staff and Irish security personnel, all watching as the Secret Service agents assessed the situation and realized they needed professional help. A tow truck was called, and it took approximately 3 hours to carefully extract the presidential limousine from the ramp without causing further damage to either the vehicle or the embassy property. The whole incident was captured on video and quickly spread online, with many people surprised to learn that these heavily armored vehicles, designed to withstand bullets and bombs, could be defeated by a simple inclined driveway. The Irish press had a field day with the story, though coverage remained respectful and often humorous rather than critical. The incident highlighted a challenge that Secret Service agents face regularly. The beast's extraordinary weight and armor make it incredibly safe, but also create practical problems in everyday situations. Fact 7. The beast gets 3.7 to 8 miles per gallon. If you think your SUV is bad on gas, consider the presidential limousine's fuel economy. The beast achieves somewhere between 3.7 and 8 miles per gallon, depending on driving conditions, making it one of the least fuel-efficient vehicles on American roads. To put that in perspective, most modern SUVs get between 20 and 30 miles per gallon, and even large commercial trucks typically achieve better fuel economy than the presidential limousine. The reason for this abysmal efficiency is straightforward. The vehicle weighs somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 pounds, roughly equivalent to 3 or 4 normal cars. All that weight comes from the extraordinary armor protection built into every surface. The doors alone weigh about 200 pounds each. The glass is several inches thick, and the entire passenger compartment is encased in layered steel, aluminum, ceramic, and titanium plating designed to stop high-powered rifle rounds and even explosions. The engine, while powerful, has to work incredibly hard just to move this massive weight, especially during the constant acceleration and braking that occurs during motorcade travel through cities. Secret Service drivers can't exactly cruise at optimal fuel-efficient speeds either, as security protocols require being able to accelerate rapidly and maintain certain speeds regardless of fuel consumption. The gas tank itself is reportedly enormous and specially protected against puncture or explosion. Even so, the beast probably requires refueling after just a few hours of typical motorcade use. The fuel costs alone for presidential travel are staggering when you consider that the motorcade includes not just the presidential limousines, but also multiple support vehicles, many of which are also heavily armored and similarly inefficient. Environmental critics have occasionally pointed out the irony when presidents travel to climate summits or environmental events in these gas-guzzling motorcades. But security requirements obviously take precedence over fuel economy considerations. The Secret Service has never publicly addressed whether they've explored hybrid or electric options for future presidential limousines, though the technical challenges would be enormous. Fact 8. A motorcade costs over $150,000 per hour. Every time the president decides to travel by motorcade instead of helicopter or other means, taxpayers foot a bill that exceeds $150,000 per hour. This staggering figure includes not just the fuel for the dozens of vehicles in a full presidential motorcade, but also the salaries and overtime pay for the Secret Service agents, local police officers who close roads and provide traffic control, communication specialists who maintain secure links, medical personnel who travel in the ambulance that's always part of the motorcade, military liaisons, and numerous other support staff. The cost calculation also factors in the wear and tear on the vehicles themselves, particularly the presidential limousines, which require extensive maintenance due to their weight and complexity. A single 4-hour motorcade trip can therefore cost over $600,000, and that doesn't even include the expense of flying all the vehicles to the destination city beforehand. The Secret Service typically transports the presidential limousines and key support vehicles in military cargo planes like the C-17 Globemaster, which itself costs tens of thousands of dollars per flight hour to operate. These expenses are why the Secret Service, despite being primarily concerned with security rather than budgets, actually prefers to limit motorcade travel time to 30 minutes or less whenever possible. Marine One, the presidential helicopter, while also expensive to operate, is significantly cheaper per mile than motorcade travel and offers the added security benefit of avoiding ground-level threats entirely. Presidents who favor motorcade travel over helicopter transport, often because they want to be seen by crowds or because weather prevents helicopter flight, end up costing taxpayers substantially more. During election years, these costs become even more controversial because the Secret Service must provide protection whether the president is traveling for official government business or campaign events, though campaigns are supposed to reimburse some costs. The full accounting of presidential travel expenses is notoriously opaque, with many figures classified for security reasons, so the $150,000 per hour estimate is likely conservative. Fact 9. Doors weigh as much as Boeing 757 doors. Each door on the presidential limousine weighs approximately 200 pounds, which is roughly equivalent to the weight of a door on a Boeing 757 commercial aircraft. Think about that comparison for a moment. The doors on the president's car weigh as much as the doors on a passenger jet. This extraordinary weight comes from the door's construction, which uses approximately 8 inches of armor plating made from multiple layers of different materials. The Secret Service has never publicly disclosed the exact composition, but security experts and automotive engineers who have studied the vehicles believe the doors contain layers of hardened steel, aluminum, ceramic plates, and titanium, each material chosen for its specific protective properties against different types of threats. Steel stops bullets, ceramic disperses the energy from shaped charges and explosives, and titanium provides structural strength while being relatively lighter than steel of equivalent strength. These layers are bonded together using classified techniques to create a single, integrated protective barrier. The windows in these doors add even more weight because they're made of polycarbonate and glass layers that can be several inches thick, designed to stop armor-piercing rounds. The hinges that support these 200-pound doors must be extraordinarily robust, essentially industrial-grade components rather than anything resembling normal automotive door hinges. Opening and closing these doors requires noticeable effort, and Secret Service agents are trained on the proper technique to avoid injury. There's no power assist on the doors because electronic systems could fail or be compromised, so it's all manual operation with mechanical latches. The sheer weight of the doors means they also serve as additional shields during an attack, with agents trained to use the open doors as protective barriers if necessary. The doors are also sealed against chemical and biological attacks with special gaskets that create an airtight seal when closed, allowing the interior to be pressurized with filtered air from the vehicle's own oxygen system. Fact 10. GM spent $15 million on R&D for one model when General Motors won the contract to build the presidential limousine that debuted in 2018 For President Donald Trump, the company spent approximately $15 million on research and development alone, separate from the actual production costs of building the vehicles. This extraordinary R&D budget reflects the immense technical challenges involved in creating a vehicle that functions simultaneously as a car, a tank, and a mobile bunker. Each presidential limousine costs around $1.5 million to actually produce, but that figure doesn't include the years of engineering work, testing, prototype development, and security certification that happened before the first production vehicle was ever built. General Motors had to essentially invent new manufacturing techniques and solve engineering problems that had never. The company had to figure out how to create doors that could withstand armor-piercing rounds while still opening and closing reliably thousands of times over the vehicle's service life. They had to design a suspension system that could handle 20,000 pounds while still providing a smooth ride for the president. They had to integrate complex electronic countermeasures, secure communication systems, and life support equipment into a vehicle that also had to be drivable in everyday traffic. The windows required entirely new glass and polycarbonate layering techniques to achieve the necessary thickness for bullet resistance while still allowing adequate visibility for the driver. The tires had to be specially developed to support the vehicle's weight while also being able to function even when completely shredded by gunfire. GM engineers worked closely with Secret Service specifications that ran hundreds of pages, covering everything from the exact angle of bulletproof glass installation to the type of armor required to defeat specific military threats. Much of this R&D work remains classified, as the techniques and materials represent competitive advantages that GM wants to protect and security measures that the Secret Service doesn't want revealed to potential adversaries. Fact 11. Presidential railroad car for 4 automobiles. Starting in 1944, the Secret Service began using a specially converted railroad car to transport presidential motorcade vehicles across the country, solving a major logistical problem that had plagued presidential security for years. This wasn't a fancy custom-built rail car, but rather a converted horse car, the type that had been used to transport racehorses and livestock. The service modified this existing rail car to hold 4 automobiles, installing heavy-duty steel ramps at both ends that could be lowered to roll the vehicles on and off. The car included water tanks installed along the sides, allowing Secret Service agents to wash the presidential vehicles during long train journeys, keeping them presentable for the president's arrival. Emergency tire racks were bolted to the walls, holding spare wheels and tires in case any of the vehicles suffered damage during transport. The interior was fitted with chains and specialized restraints to keep the cars from shifting during the constant acceleration, braking, and turning that occurs during rail travel. This railroad transportation system solved multiple problems simultaneously. First, it meant the presidential vehicles didn't accumulate road miles during transit between cities, preserving them for actual presidential use and reducing maintenance requirements. Second, it was far more secure than driving the vehicles on public highways where they could potentially be sabotaged or tracked by hostile actors. Third, it was remarkably efficient, as a single railroad car could transport the president's entire vehicle fleet in one trip rather than requiring multiple drivers and support vehicles. The Secret Service continued using this railroad car system for several decades until the development of large military cargo aircraft like the C-130 and C-17 made it more practical to fly the vehicles instead. The railroad car represented an ingenious low-tech solution that served presidential security well through the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, an era when presidential travel was becoming more frequent, but air transport was still relatively limited. Fact 12. Top speed maxes out at 60 miles per hour. Despite being built on a heavy-duty Chevrolet truck chassis with what's believed to be a diesel engine producing substantial horsepower, the beast can only reach a maximum speed of approximately 60 miles per hour. Even more surprising, the vehicle takes about 15 seconds to accelerate from 0 to 60, which is slower than most modern economy cars and minivans. For reference, a typical family sedan can hit 60 miles per hour in about 7 to 9 seconds, meaning the presidential limousine takes roughly twice as long to reach that speed. This sluggish performance is entirely due to the vehicle's enormous weight, which ranges between 15,000 and 20,000 pounds, depending on the specific configuration. That's equivalent to carrying 7 to 10 normal cars' worth of mass. The engine, no matter how powerful, faces the simple physics problem of moving all that armored steel, ceramic, and titanium. The transmission has to be specially reinforced just to handle the torque requirements of getting the beast moving from a standstill. The 60 mph top speed isn't really a significant security limitation because presidential motorcades rarely travel at highway speeds anyway. Most motorcade movement happens on city streets at speeds between 30 and 50 mph, with the priority being maintaining formation and executing security maneuvers rather than outrunning threats. The Secret Service's defensive strategy doesn't rely on speed, but rather on armor, redundancy through decoy vehicles, and the ability to seal the president inside a protected environment until reinforcements arrive. The Beast is designed to withstand sustained attacks while stationary if necessary, with enough armor to stop armor-piercing rounds and enough oxygen supply to keep occupants alive even in chemical or biological attack scenarios. Still, the slow acceleration can be problematic in specific emergency situations where the motorcade needs to rapidly evacuate an area, which is why the drivers undergo extensive training in emergency maneuvers and why the motorcade always includes faster chase vehicles. Fact 13. President sometimes isn't in the motorcade. Here's a security tactic that sounds almost paranoid until you think about it. The Secret Service occasionally runs complete presidential motorcades with no president actually on board. These ghost motorcades feature all the usual elements you'd expect to see when the president travels, including multiple identical limousines, the supporting cast of SUVs filled with agents, communications vehicles, the ambulance, and even the complete motorcycle escort from local police. The motorcade follows the planned route, makes the expected stops, and maintains all the security protocols of a real presidential movement. Meanwhile, the actual president travels by a completely different method, often a more secure route that hostile observers aren't watching. This elaborate security theater serves multiple purposes. First, it tests whether anyone is conducting surveillance on the president's movements, as hostile intelligence services or potential attackers might reveal themselves by positioning observers along what they believe is the president's route. Second, it confuses any surveillance that is taking place, making it impossible for adversaries to know whether any given motorcade movement is real or a decoy. Third, it allows the president to travel with a smaller, less conspicuous security presence when necessary, since all the attention is focused on the decoy motorcade drawing attention across town. The Secret Service never confirms when these ghost motorcades occur, maintaining operational security by keeping everyone guessing. Journalists who regularly cover the White House have occasionally reported suspicions that certain motorcade movements seemed off, perhaps noticing that the usual bustling activity and last-minute preparations that precede real presidential movements were absent, but these observations remain speculation. The tactic is particularly useful during high-threat situations or when intelligence suggests that adversaries are actively planning attacks. By making it impossible to predict whether any given motorcade actually contains the president, the Secret Service multiplies the difficulty of any attack planning. Fact 14. Drivers train on shell game choreography. At the Secret Service's James J. Rowley Training Center, located on over 400 acres in Maryland, specially selected agents undergo intensive training in what the service calls shell game choreography, the complex art of moving identical presidential limousines in and out of formation while maintaining the appearance of a normal motorcade. This isn't just a matter of changing lanes occasionally. The maneuvers are precisely choreographed sequences where multiple identical vehicles swap positions through carefully timed movements that must be executed flawlessly at various speeds and in different traffic conditions. Drivers practice these maneuvers repeatedly until the movements become muscle memory, allowing them to execute complex position swaps without hesitation even in high-stress situations. The training facility includes mock city streets, highway sections, and various terrain types where drivers can rehearse the choreography under different conditions. They practice the maneuvers at night, in rain, in fog, and in simulated emergency situations where the motorcade must react to threats while simultaneously continuing the position-swapping routine. The training also emphasizes communication, as drivers must coordinate their movements through radio contact using coded phrases that inform other drivers of upcoming maneuvers without broadcasting tactical information that could be intercepted. Only the most skilled drivers are selected for presidential motorcade duty, and even they must complete months of specialized training before being cleared to drive one of the presidential limousines. The shell game choreography requires not just driving skill, but also spatial awareness, split-second decision-making, and the ability to anticipate how other vehicles in the formation will move. Drivers must maintain these skills through regular practice sessions, even after completing initial training. The training center also allows the Secret Service to rehearse complete motorcade movements before major presidential trips, running through the planned routes and timing with the actual vehicles that will be used, identifying potential problems before the president's actual travel day. Fact 15. Bush's Beast stalled in Rome, 2007. During President George W. Bush's visit to Rome in June of 2007, one of the presidential limousines suddenly stalled on a city street, demonstrating both a vulnerability in even the most protected vehicles and the value of the Secret Service's redundancy strategies. The vehicle had been operating normally as part of the motorcade when the engine simply died, leaving the massive armored limousine sitting motionless in the middle of a Roman street. The exact cause of the mechanical failure was never publicly disclosed, though some reports suggested it might have been related to the vehicle's complex fuel system, or possibly the extreme weight stressing the engine during Rome's hilly terrain. Secret Service agents immediately recognized they had a problem. The stopped vehicle was blocking traffic, creating a security vulnerability, and potentially revealing information about mechanical weaknesses if Italian observers paid too close attention to the disabled limousine. The stall lasted approximately 5 minutes, which doesn't sound like much time, but is an eternity from a security perspective when you have an immobile presidential vehicle in a foreign country. Fortunately, this is exactly the scenario that the multi-vehicle strategy is designed to handle. The motorcade included other identical limousines, so the president was either already in a backup vehicle or was immediately transferred to one, and the motorcade continued without significant delay. The stalled limousine was left behind with Secret Service agents who waited for it to be started again, or if necessary, to be towed by one of the support vehicles that always accompany presidential motorcades. The incident received limited press coverage at the time, partly because the Secret Service moved quickly to minimize the spectacle, and partly because it wasn't clear to observers which vehicle had stalled or whether it had been carrying the president. This real-world breakdown proved the necessity of the service's practice of traveling with multiple identical vehicles, as mechanical failures can occur even with the most carefully maintained machines.